Dale is renting a 2-bedroom in Columbus, Ohio for $1950 a month. Warren is looking at a $410,000 house 4 blocks over. Same age, 39. Same income, $91,000 a year. Same savings, $120,000 in the bank. Warren ran the numbers on his phone last week, and by his math, buying wins. Here's the problem. His math used the wrong number, and it's the exact number almost everyone uses first. By the end of this video, you'll know the number he should have used instead, built from scratch on this exact house. If you want the formula to run on your own numbers before you sign anything, subscribe now. Warren's house is $410,000. 20% down, $82,000. The rest financed, $328,000. 30-year fixed, 6.69%. Here's the mistake Warren made first, and it's the one almost everyone makes. He ran a mortgage calculator, got a monthly payment of roughly $2,115, looked at Dale's $1,950 rent, and figured the gap was small enough that owning still won because of the equity he'd be building. I know how that sounds. Let me earn the case against it. A mortgage payment isn't one cost. It's 2 different things wearing the same number. Part of it is interest, gone the second it's paid, exactly like rent. The other part is principal, which isn't a cost at all. It's Warren paying himself, moving money from his checking account into his own house. Comparing $2,115 to $1,950 is comparing rent, which is entirely gone, to a number that's part gone and part savings. That's not a fair fight. And in the early years of a 30-year loan, the equity slice of that payment is thin. Most of it, in year 1, is interest. If the payment isn't the right number, what is? Here's the number. Take the value of the house, 5% of it, divide by 12. That's the line that actually belongs next to Dale's rent, not the mortgage payment. We're going to build that number from scratch on Warren's exact house, one piece at a time. And by the end, you'll see exactly why it's very different from the classic 5% figure everyone quotes. First piece, property tax. Roughly 1% of the home's value a year. On a $410,000 house, that's $4,100 a year. $342 a month. No residual value. It's paid and it's gone. The same way rent is gone. Second piece, maintenance. Also roughly 1% a year, but averaged over many years, not any single one. Some years, close to nothing. Other years, a roof or a furnace, 5 figures at once. On this house, that averages to another $4,100 a year, another $342 a month. Treat that as a center point, not a promise. Older homes run higher, newer builds run lower. Now the piece that decides almost everything in this video, and it's the one most people skip entirely. The cost of capital. It has 2 separate halves, and keeping them separate is the whole point. Half 1, the cost of debt. Warren borrowed $328,000 at 6.69%. That's real interest, leaving his account every month, not an estimate. $328,000 times 6.69% comes to $21,943 a year. $1,829 a month, just in interest in year 1. Half 2, the cost of equity. Warren put $82,000 down. That money didn't vanish. It's locked into the house instead of sitting in a stock portfolio. Real estate, historically, tends to return less than a diversified stock portfolio over long stretches, after inflation, and that gap is usually estimated around 3% a year. $82,000 times 3% is $2,460 a year, $205 a month. That's the price of choosing a house over a portfolio with that $82,000. Add the 2 halves, $1,829 plus $205. $2,034 a month just for the cost of capital on this house at today's rate. Now put every piece on the table. $342 for tax, $342 for maintenance, $2,034 for capital. Add it up. $2,718 a month. Put that next to Dale's rent. $2,718 to own this house. $1,950 to rent it. That's not close. That's $768 a month, every single month. And almost all of that gap is coming from one place: the interest on the loan. Not the down payment, not the taxes, not the roof. But that gap only holds at today's rate. It doesn't tell you what this exact house would have cost Warren to own if he'd bought it years ago at a completely different rate environment. And it doesn't tell you what happens to $768 a month if it's invested instead of spent for the next 20 or 30 years. Both of those change this picture more than almost anything else here. Rewind the cost of debt, only, nothing else, to a 3% rate, the kind of rate that was common not long ago. $328,000 times 3% is $9,840 a year, $820 a month instead of $1,829. Add the $205 cost of equity, unchanged, and the cost of capital drops to $1,025 a month. Add tax and maintenance back in, $342 and $342, and the total comes to $1,709 a month. That's almost exactly the classic 5% figure people still quote. $410,000 times 5% divided by 12 is $1,708. At a 3% rate, the rule and the real math land in the same place. The rule wasn't wrong back then. It was accurate for that rate environment on this exact house. It just never got updated when rates moved. This is the part that matters for Warren right now, in this rate environment, not that one. His real number is $2,718, not $1,708, because his real rate is 6.69%, not 3%. That $768 a month gap doesn't disappear once it's calculated. It sits in Dale's account. If he spends it on upgrades that don't build anything, the entire advantage of renting quietly disappears. But if he puts it into an index fund every single month, without fail, it stops being a one-time head start and becomes a habit that compounds. This year's contribution has decades to grow. So does next year's. So does every year after that. Most comparisons picture the renter investing once, at the start, and doing nothing for 30 years. That's not what disciplined looks like. The real advantage isn't one deposit. It's $768 new dollars a month, compounding the whole way through. Now, if I only showed you the version where renting wins outright, I'd be doing exactly what I've spent this whole video pushing back against. There's a real case for Warren here, even at a $768 gap. A house is one of the few things an ordinary person can hold for 30 years without watching its price move every morning. Dale's portfolio, however disciplined he is about feeding it, moves in real time, and he sees every drop. Warren doesn't check his home's value at breakfast, and that quiet difference is worth something no formula price is in. There's also the part no formula touches: a lease that doesn't get renewed, a landlord who decides to sell, rent that climbs because the market allows it. Aside from taxes and maintenance, Warren's payment on the debt side is locked in on the day he signs, and that's a kind of certainty Dale doesn't fully have, no matter how large the monthly gap looks today. None of that shows up in $2,718 a month. It doesn't have to be irrational for Warren to buy here, even at this gap. It just has to be a choice made with the real number in hand, not a mortgage calculator, and not a rule of thumb calibrated to a rate environment that isn't the one on the table anymore. So when does Warren actually close that gap? In numbers, not in feelings. First condition. If Warren could lock a lower rate, say through an assumable loan at 4% instead of 6.69%, the cost of debt alone drops to $328,000 times 4%, $13,120 a year, $1,093 a month. Add the $205 cost of equity, and capital comes to $1,298. Add tax and maintenance, $342 and $342, and the total is $1,982 a month. That's almost a wash against Dale's $1,950 rent, a $32 gap instead of $768. One number moved, and the entire comparison flipped from lopsided to essentially even. Second condition. If Dale has already maxed out his tax-advantaged retirement accounts, or if his alternative portfolio is a mix of stocks and bonds instead of fully stocks, the expected return gap between stocks and real estate narrows. Drop the cost of equity assumption from 3% to 1.5%, and that piece falls to $103 a month instead of $205. But run the math at Warren's actual 6.69% rate with that change, and the total only drops to about $2,616 a month, still $666 above rent. At today's rate, the mortgage itself is doing almost all the work in this number. The equity assumption barely moves it. This is arithmetic, not advice. Your rate, your tax bracket, and your own investment mix change exactly where this number lands for you. And only you have those details. Here's what this house actually teaches. 5% was never a fixed rule. It's 3 lines: tax, maintenance, and the cost of capital. And the cost of capital is 2 more lines underneath that: the cost of debt and the cost of equity, tracking 2 completely different things. The cost of debt moves with the rate on the day you sign. The cost of equity moves with how the alternative money would have been invested. At a 3% rate, both lines land close enough together that 5% works as shorthand. At 6.69%, the cost of debt alone can swallow most of the comparison. That's the actual trap. Not renting, not buying. Reusing a number that was only ever accurate for a rate that isn't the one in front of you. If you want to run this on your own house, don't stop at 5% divided by 12. Break it into tax, maintenance, cost of debt at your actual rate, and cost of equity at your actual alternative. That's the number that's yours this year, not whichever year the rule of thumb was calibrated for. It still won't tell you the one thing that decides almost everything else: how many years you'd need to stay in that exact house before owning it actually catches up to renting it, even at a gap this size.